27. Yep, Proverbs 27. Verse 1. Alright. Proverbs 27 and verse 1. Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth. Bragging about what you're going to do in the future, and the plans that you have, and how everything's going to come to pass in just such a way, is ill-advised. The most obvious example is you may not live to see tomorrow. But there's also a whole spectrum of there are variables that can be injected into your plans that you have no idea of anticipating. And so being confident and going ahead and taking glory and claim for yourself of something that has not yet come to pass is not wise.
Planning plan to do something.
Well, one is bragging about it.
I'm going to.
Yeah, this is what's going to happen to me. This is what I've got in store. This is what we're doing, and there's no acknowledgement within that of the humility. If there are things beyond your control, that's why the expression in the New Testament shows up of rather than saying we're going to go to this town and for this year we're going to buy and we're going to sell and we're going to make a good profit. But rather the humble answer is, if the Lord wills that we live, we will do this and this. So one is, this is our plans if, we're permitted to carry forth on it. And so it's keeping ourselves in the proper position between us and God of who's really in charge. Yeah.
I plan on doing a lot of things until I walk past that white fence, white gate, or black gate. Plans change. Plans change. Beyond my control.
Yeah.
Because of that part of my control.
Yeah.
Both of planning different stuff. Okay.
Yeah. This is definitely not an admonition not to plan, but having humility as we're talking of our plans, recognizing that we don't know what all can come along. To that end, talking about bragging, it says, "Let another man praise thee, and not thine own mouth, a stranger, and not thine own lips." If you're having to brag on yourself, there's a problem. Right? Doesn't mean you haven't done something right, but if you're seeking your own glory through using your mouth to advocate for it, I'm trying to think of the other proverb we'd already looked at about one who's seeking his own glory. Yeah, that's the idea of God, humbling the proud and exalting the humble. But there was one specifically that we had looked at in the past few weeks about the relatively lack of value of man who's seeking his own glory and honor. There's no real glory and honor in it. It's all vanity. I can't find it at the moment. That one seems pretty straightforward, but it's one we kind of struggle to apply, right? We're always anxious to brag about ourselves. Verse 3. A stone is heavy, and the sand weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than them both. All right, anybody ever had to lift and tote some rip-rap rocks before? Big heavy stones? Ever had to carry one? Is that fun? No? They're what? They're heavy. All right. Bags of sand? heavy. And y'all were shifting sand around using the gorilla cart and had wheels, but that stuff adds up. So imagine carrying that, in a sack on your back. You can feel the weight of it pressing you down. So you've got two both very relatable illustrations of the weight of sand and the weight of heavy rocks. So using those things that you've handled and dealt with, you can understand now the point, Elizabeth. It's time to be quiet. That a fool's wrath is heavier than both. Okay, can you see the heaviness of anger? No, right? You can't carry it in the same way. But the burden that this fool is both carrying for himself, and if you are under that wrath, this is something that is very difficult to get away from, right? Because the fool is the one who says there is no God, right? He hasn't, he's not pursuing righteousness or anything, and he already knows everything, so how are you going to teach him anything? Right? The one who, if you answer him, well, you're not really profited. If you don't answer him, he's not really profited. And so when you've got this type of individual who is now upset, it's one of those Hatfield and McCoy type grudges, right? A good old grudge that can last for generations till you don't even know why. Should our wrath be like that? Does our wrath work the righteousness of God? No. So we're supposed to be quick to listen, slow to wrath, slow to speak, right? And when we do get full of anger, we've got to let it go. Wrath is cruel. Anger is outrageous. But who is able to stand before envy? Right, so you got tiers of problematic behavior. And this is more than just, emotion. Wrath is troublesome. How so? It's cruel. When you're full of wrath, you can be quite mean, vicious. Anger, outrageous. The things that you say and do when you're full of anger, if you look back when you're calm, like that was wildly inappropriate to me. Why would I do that? That's so wrong. It's an outrageous element. But as bad as those two are, here you are as a tier above those. It says, who is able to stand before envy or jealousy? You'd also use the word covetousness. We tend to recognize how problematic anger and wrath are. But covetousness and envy and jealousy, we kind of put down, well, that's kind of a lesser thing. And this is really flipping it on its head. If you can't be content and you're looking at someone else's stuff or situation or life, and it can consume you and cause great strife, heartache, problems. Family members when there's a death. It can be a very difficult time. One of the most challenging times is when they have to divvy up stuff. And if you have one or more parties who are obsessed with stuff and making sure they're getting their fair share and that someone else isn't, and envy gets into it, what's already a painful process can be excruciating, and take normal anger, and it can be, it's like lacing it with poison. It can be really, really bad. It's an example I can think of on the fly. Any questions on any of that? Verse 5. Open rebuke is better than secret love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. A real friend will tell you when you're in the wrong. That's not pleasant to hear. That's what's being described as the wound there. To be rebuked means You're being publicly responded to, open directly, of some error. And so when that's done to you and to your face, it says that's better than having someone come along beside you in private and declaring how much they care for you, but they're not willing to say that publicly. That's the idea of the secret love. That's not real love. Right? This is just flattery, basically. And so that individual who's only willing to be kind to you in kind of that secret places, that's an enemy. That's what's describing there is the kisses of an enemy. They're deceitful. Whereas, those wounds from a friend, when the civil authority punished somebody, right, there would be, stripes or a beating or whatever it was, and there'd be some marks associated with it, wounds. And the idea is to learn from it and not repeat it. So when you have a faithful friend who's willing to tell you the truth, willing to tell you the hard things, it stings. But it's better to have that sting and have the opportunity to learn, whether you choose to or not, than have, yes men around you who say, oh, yes, you're in the right, when they're talking to you. But then when they're around someone else, they're running you in the ground and pointing out all your flaws. You don't have any opportunity to improve, and you're just slandered. So whether you're the friend who needs to say the hard truth, or whether you're the one who's having to hear a hard truth about yourself, remember that this is a sign of friendship when someone is willing to tell you the hard things. Because we're not always going to be right. The only one who's right 100% of the time is the fool. At least in his own eyes. So you got to figure it out. I don't have to tell me. Questions? All right. Verse 7 is about perspective. The full soul loatheth a honeycomb, but to the hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet. All right, so the most natural example of this is if you have more food than you need, you have eaten to the full, think of like post-Thanksgiving meal, and somebody offers you another big old piece of chocolate cake, and you've already undone the belt, and you're just aching. The idea of eating one more thing is absolutely abhorrent. I don't want it. Get it away from me. Other perspective is you haven't eaten today. You haven't eaten yesterday. You didn't eat the day before. You're now 3 days without food, and somebody brings you, a box of Domino's pizza that's been sitting out in the parking lot for a few days. Something normally you'd be like, this is disgusting, but because of where you're at, you're like, this is close to edible. And when you're eating it and it's food, you're like, okay, this is pretty good. That's the illustration here, is that the full soul loatheth a honeycomb, but to the hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet.
I always understood it as the guy who had all he wanted didn't want not the honey, but the comb the honey was on. It was just that, and hungry man, I don't care.
Yeah, so it's talking about the relative sweetness, something that when you don't have any appetite, right, because you're full on other things, even something that's really sweet isn't appealing. Let's say, like, the Word of God. If you are full on the things of this world, regardless of how good this is, you don't have any appetite for it. Whereas someone who's hungering for it, right, the least little bit, maybe you don't have a full copy, maybe you only get one little verse or nugget or something, then that is so good and encouraging and enriching. Where are we at? Any other thoughts on that one? Does that make more sense, Connie? Verse 8, as a bird that wandereth from her nest, so is a man that wandereth from his place. back in 26, we had, as the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. You know, birds getting from place to place, whether they're walking or flying. It's a step at a time. That was the proverb before. Well, here, as a bird that wandereth from her nest. Where's the bird supposed to be? At the nest. And so a man that wandereth from his place, right? Bad things happen when you're wandering from the place you're supposed to be at. A husband who goes to his job and then returns to his home and doesn't go make provision for wandering to other locations will be much less likely to find himself in a dumb position than one who is frequently AWOL. What can happen to the nest while the bird's wandering? It's not protected, subject to being damaged. So, not showing diligence to that which we've been put in charge over. Verse 9. Ointment and perfume rejoice the heart. All right, so this is a statement of fact. So doth the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. All right. So the ointment and the perfume are the things that are impacting the heart. It's causing it to rejoice. Right? Why do people take flowers to hospital rooms? They smell good. They look pretty. They're livening up a kind of dark and dreary situation. Right? Take kind of antiseptic spell out of it. Ointments and perfumes, and these are fragrances that have the ability to make you feel a little bit better. So that's just a statement of reality. It's using that to illustrate that by hearty counsel, that's the input, the sweetness of a man's friend. So when a friend is coming and giving you good, heartfelt counsel, it can have a similar impact of how the heart rejoices when you smell those good smells, the sweetness of a man. So you have the ability to encourage and lift up and help other people by giving them good, hearty counsel from the heart, speaking the truth in love. Make sense? Verse 10. Thine own friend and thy father's friend forsake not. Neither go into thy brother's house in the day of thy calamity, for better is a neighbor that is near than a brother far off. There is value in investing in friendships. This idea of that, well, I'm having a hard time. I'm only going to depend on my blood. My blood is a long way off. If you haven't been encouraging and fostering the friendships of your neighbors around you, that may leave you with your only option. But here it's talking about not only your friends, but also the friends of your father. What kind of reputation did your father probably have if you're able to depend on his friends? Right? He's leaving a legacy of his behavior oh, you're so-and-so's boy. Yeah, happy to help you. So there's a long-term impact. And so as you're doing good and taking care of people beyond just your circle, you can be aiding and setting up your children years down the road. The day of the calamity, better is a neighbor that is near than a brother afar off. Proximity matters. I mean, it's gotten perhaps less urgent now, and since we have convenient modes of transport for many miles and nice roads that make it easy to do. But you think about a time when you got so much of a mile radius around where you're at from you or your animal that you're riding. That's as far as you can get in a day. If you need help, trying to go a week's journey to get help is probably defeats the purpose. It would be inaccessible. So, foster friendships. They're worthwhile. 11. My son, be wise, and make my heart glad, that I may answer him that reproacheth me. The guy that's reproaching the father here that's speaking is probably talking about the son. So, son, if you're using wisdom and you're obeying, my counsel and advice here and making wise choices in your life, then I'll be able to answer someone who's reproaching me about you with, well, you just don't know the full situation. Here's what they're doing. As opposed to having to hang your head in shame when someone comes to talk about what your child has given up to, and you're like, yeah, I know. Questions? A prudent man foreseeth the evil, and hideth himself. But the simple pass on, and are punished. All right. Robin Hood and Little John are walking through the forest. Oodalolly, golly, what a day. What's hiding in the forest? The sheriff and his men, right? The wise guy is attentive to it, and they flee and hide themselves. Versus the simpleton goes on, and he's caught in this trap. Right? That's kind of the imagery here, that you've got a band of robbers, and you can see that there's trouble ahead. You get yourself out of the way. You don't just walk into it. But to do that, you have to be alert, paying attention. There are some parts of downtown Atlanta that I go on high alert because it does not feel safe, and you're trying to make sure you're making wise decisions and being very risk adverse. But if you got your head in the clouds and you're just kind of going about your business as if you're invincible and no one's going to mess with you, you just pass along and you just kind of walk into danger. The idea of being circumspect, having your head on the swivel, and this applies beyond just physical danger or harm, but thinking about the path that you're on. Are you leading down to something that will be glorifying to God, or are you leading down to something that will get yourself into trouble? Because often the first thing we do during that path is not the big thing that really causes a lot of harm. One little step, one little step, one little step. And before you know it, you're up to your neck. Whereas if you're paying attention, you're looking at your map, right? Here's the straight and narrow. There's the Lord. I've deviated. Let me get back. Let me get back. Let me get back. Whereas I'm just rocking along, doing what I want, how I want. And you keep going that way until it's the Lord who brings you back. You may not enjoy that return trip. Mm-hmm. Verse 13. Take his garment that is surety for a stranger, and take a pledge of him for a strange woman. All right, so we got a double suretyship here. Surety. This is someone who is guaranteeing someone else's obligation. So if you have a stranger come into town and they have to do something, and one of your local guys says, oh, I'll back him up, I'll be surety. He doesn't know this person. And he's saying he's going to back it up. Now, one, you have to question his wisdom. But two, you have to, is he serious? So rather than just taking his word for it, you need to take a pledge to back up his word that he's going to stand for that other person. So you've got a double kind of collateral here. But what do you need to take as a pledge? His clothes. All right? If I've got your winter coat and it's cold outside, what's going to jolly well make sure you show up? The coat, right? That's the idea, is that don't trust this person. That's the meaning behind this proverb of someone who's willing to stand in the stead for a stranger that they don't know, or a strange woman, right? Doesn't matter, that you need to make sure that you're not just trusting their word, because this is not going to be a reliable individual. So get collateral of their clothing, get another, something, so that you have a way to enforce the expectation. Because you have no reason to expect the stranger. You don't know them. You don't have reputation. that they'll follow through. And so you're not in any better position by someone else who's willing to just say that they'll back them up. Does that make sense? We'll do verse 14. We'll wrap that up for the night. We'll be halfway. He that blesseth his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to him. The curse is counted to the friend that's being blessed. So when you've got someone rising with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, this is a description for flattery, right? So insincerity. Why is it with a loud voice? So everybody can hear. This is not about a matter between I'm trying to pray for you and bless that the Lord would bless you, but this overt, insincere action to butter you up, basically. This is the end result of that is that person in your life. It's going to be the equivalent of having, a negative, as if he had put a curse on you, that there will be problems and consequences that come with it. Right? Having people who just speak flattering words to you is going to have a cost if you allow them to be in your circle and to trust them. Because it's, by definition, insincere. All things for show.